Right now, your bank is making more money off of your savings than you are. And honestly, they're counting on that you'll never figure that out. Look, I sit across from new clients every single week. People that have done everything right. They've worked hard. They've saved up like 40, 60, 100 grand. They'll slide a bank statement across their desk like it's a trophy. And I have to look them in the eye and tell them the truth. That pile of cash isn't working for them. It's working for the bank. Now, after 15 years as a financial advisor, I can tell you that this is the most common mistake that I see, and it's costing ordinary people tens of thousands of pounds, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds over their lifetime. So today, I'm going to show you three things. Firstly, how the banks make their money using yours. Secondly, why keeping large amounts of cash in the bank is just straight up a mathematical error. And third, the exact system that the wealthy use to play the banks at their own game. And here's the thing that banks really hope that you never hear. The fix isn't complicated. It's just something that nobody has shown you yet. So let's start with what happens the moment that your money lands into your bank account. Because most people think the bank just holds it like a big safe with your name on it. Now that couldn't be further from the truth. Think about it like this. Imagine you lend your lawnmower to your neighbour and they say, oh, cheers, yeah, I'll just keep it in the shed for you. But instead of keeping it safe in the shed, they rent it out to every other house on the street, charging everybody like a tenner a go. Then at the end of the summer, they give you the lawnmower back and say, yeah, here's £5 for letting me borrow it. That is exactly what your bank does. They're literally doing that with your money. Even if you've got a few grand in your current account right now, that's exactly how they are making money off of it. Here is how it works. You put 10 grand into your savings account. The bank pays you interest, right? Maybe 2% if you're absolutely lucky. But the Bank of England base rate, which is the interest rate created by the Bank of England as the central base interest rate, is currently 3.75%. This is correct as the time of filming. It can change, obviously. Now, your bank can take your money and park it overnight with the Bank of England and pocket the difference. That's nearly 2% profit, risk-free, for doing absolutely nothing except sitting between the Bank of England and you and your money. But here's where it actually starts to escalate. Where they really make their money, and honestly, this is the part that really winds me up, is lending. They take that money, they take your 10 grand and lend it to someone else buying a house at 4.5%, or someone getting a car loan at 9%. And here's the kicker, and this is the real brutal one. They stick it on someone's credit card at 25%. Now, you're starting to see the truth that banks hope that nobody ever hears. What that actually means is you are the investor, but they're keeping all the returns. And if you think that like, oh, that's not going to apply to me, I found a way around it, here's where banks get really, really clever. Now, some of you are probably thinking, hold on a minute, my bank gave me a 5% fixed rate, so I'm doing all right in compared to all of those rates. Here's the thing. Banks don't offer those rates because they're generous, right? They don't want the best for you necessarily. They offer them because they've got mountains of data on how people like me and you actually behave. And that data says something pretty damning about all of us, I would say, that we're all just financially lazy. They know that if they dangle a 5% rate for 12 months, a huge chunk of people will forget to move their money when it ends. So on day 366, that rate will quietly drop to 1.2%. And they're banking, quite literally, excuse the pun, on you not noticing that for years. Like, I always remember like a few years ago, I had this client, lovely lady, really, really sharp. And she was like, yeah, I'm on top of it. I check for the best rates all the time for any new money that I'm putting into the bank, essentially. But when I checked her account, she'd been on a 1.4% rollover default rate for 3 years and had no idea because her teaser rate had run out. 3 years. And I would put money on it that some of you watching this right now are in exactly the same boat. Like, drop a comment if you've realized that you actually need to kind of check your savings rate. I guarantee you're not alone. Now, this isn't just her. Like I said, this is everybody. The Citizens Advice Bureau investigated this and found that loyal customers were losing over £1 billion a year just on savings alone. £1 billion with a B, just from not switching their money. To put that in like your terms, let's say that you've got 20 grand in a savings account that's rolled over onto a default rate. You could be losing 300, 400, 500 quid a year just by not moving it. That's a holiday a year, right? Just gone every single year. So even when you think you're being smart with your cash, the bank is already 2 steps ahead. That's the real trick. And the moment that you understand the game that they're all playing, you stop playing by their rules. And in a minute, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. But first, the banks aren't actually the biggest threat to your money. There's something else. And this is the bit that catches everybody off guard. Inflation. Now, I know inflation sounds like one of those boring economic words, but let me put it this way. Say you've got 50 grand in the bank. Now, you check your app every day and it's £50,000. It was the same number yesterday, it was the same number last month. It feels safe. Except it's probably the riskiest thing that we are ever exposed to, because that 50 grand bought you, say, a certain amount of stuff last year. This year, everything costs more, doesn't it? You've definitely felt it over the last couple of years. Food, petrol, energy, the lot. If inflation is running at 3% and your bank is paying you 1%, you are physically losing 2% of what your money can actually buy every single year. Your pound will still be a pound. You'll get that 1% interest rate on it, so it'll go up a little bit. But the real loss every single year is 2%. And here's something crazy. The Bank of England's own data shows that a pound in 2004 is worth roughly 50p today. That is not a crash. That's not a recession. It's just inflation quietly doing its thing in the background while we're all just sat here passively watching Netflix, right? Now, over 20 years, over an average 20-year period, inflation will quietly eat through about 1/3 of your savings. So you will still see £50,000 on your screen. So it will always be there. There's no risk to your capital. But it will buy you what £33,000 buys you today. Like, think about it. You've all probably noticed how things are so much more expensive than they were last year, let alone 20 years ago. And the truth is that the banks hope that you never actually understand this. Because again, the moment you realize those two factors of how the bank uses your money and how that your cash is shrinking by sitting idle in your bank account, you start looking for the exit. And now, if you know someone who just hoards cash sitting in the bank, send them this video. Seriously, they will thank you. So, we've seen the 3 problems. And it all sounds a bit grim, right? But here is where it flips. Because once you see all of these things clearly, the solution becomes almost obvious. And this is exactly what the wealthy have been doing quietly for decades, and how I instill this in every single person that I work with. When I look at my wealthiest clients, what they do versus what everyone else does, there's a huge difference. Normal people treat their bank account like a bathtub, right? Money flows in, sits in there, and just slowly drains out the plug hole, spending and bills. Wealthy people, they treat theirs like a roundabout, right? Or a junction. Money comes in and it automatically gets rerouted to other roads and other parts immediately. And most people just don't do this. So I had this client once, let's for the argument's sake call him Mark. He came to me with 80 grand just sitting in his current account. 80 grand. And he was like, I just don't really know what to do with it. And fair enough, not many people do, right? So I ran through the numbers of what I tried to explain this whole theory to him essentially. And I ran him through the numbers of how much profit his bank had probably earned off of that money in the previous 5 years. It was over 6 grand, not for Mark, but for the bank. When I showed him that number, he just started staring at me and he basically goes, so basically, I've just been kind of paying them to hold my money. Yeah, mate. Basically, that's exactly what you've been doing. So once we set up what I'm going to go through in a minute, the hub system for him, his wealth and his savings were on track to grow by an extra 150 grand across 25 years. Same salary, same spending. Just by changing where his money sat on the first or close to it every single month. So what's the system that turns Mark's dead money into a wealth building machine? The reality is it's way, way simpler than you think. It is called the 50-30-20 rule. And I've kind of adapted this specifically for the hub strategy. So on payday, your salary hits your main account. And then within 24 hours, hopefully, it gets split on that roundabout and sent to where it actually belongs. Now, these percentages, of course, they're just guidance, right? They're not 100% rules set in stone. So try to adapt these to suit your personal circumstances and goals. Again, most people will say, oh, my essentials, they're more than 50%. I get it. Times are hard right now, but try to use this as much as you possibly can as a guide percentage. Just use them as a starting point and see where you go. So first, 50%. This stays, so your money lands into your bank account. This stays in your main bank account. And it's purely to cover stuff that you have to pay, your essentials. So your rent or mortgage, your council tax, utilities, the basic standard of living. Think of this as like boring but essential autopilot. So set up the direct debits, let them clear, don't touch it. This isn't the exciting bit, but it's what stops the whole system from just breaking apart. Second, the 30%. The very next day after you're paid, or ideally even on payday, a standing order should sweep this into a separate account of spending, essentially. A lot of my clients, they'll tend to use digital banks for this because it's quite good in terms of budgeting and things like that within it. So Monzo, Starling, that sort of thing. Now, this is your guilt-free spending money. Eating out, socializing, clothes, holidays, all that sort of stuff. Now, when that pot is empty, you just stop spending until next month. It's really super simple. I've done another video on like the one number budget method. It's basically this wrapped up in a different way, where if you track all of these different numbers, you'll get lost. If you just have one account with an amount of money in it that is your spending account, your spending amount for that month, you'll follow it way easier. And here's what's clever about separating it. You'll never feel guilty about spending that fun money, that spending money, because everything else has already been accounted for. Essentials, and we'll go on to into a minute, the growth bit. That constant like low level stress that we all feel all the time before you make any purchase, that kind of like, can I afford this? That feeling is absolutely gone because you've already answered the question. You already know the answer. So tell me in the comments, who else has that feeling of that kind of constant low level stress? Because I think it's way more common than everyone admits. Now, right, stay with me here. We're talking now about the 20%, that extra bit. This is the bit that actually moves the needle for your future wealth building. Everything before this was about solid base and defense. This is where you go on offense. So the third bit, the 20%. Now, before we go into this, I know what some of you are thinking. 20%, you're having a laugh, never going to work. I can barely save like a few pennies each month. And look, I hear you. I get it. It is really tough. When I first started out, I couldn't do 20% either. I started at 5, then went to 8, then went to 12. The actual like number matters way less than the habit. But here's why this slice is the one that changes everything. This is the exact money that the banks pray you just leave sitting around in your current account or a basic savings account doing nothing. So on payday, this 20% gets sent straight out of your bank automatically. Then it splits into 2 jobs. The first job is wealth creation. This is your offense. This goes straight into something like a stocks and shares ISA or a pension, if a SIP if you've got one, ideally in your workplace pension before all of this, but in something like a stocks or shares ISAs is brilliant. Even 200 quid a month into a simple investment over 25 years could grow well over to 100 grand. That's not magic. That's just money making more money on top of itself year after year. This is exactly what the banks are doing with your money. You need to start doing it for yourself. The second job is wealth protection, your defense. Everyone gets so obsessed with growing and building and investments that they forget you've got to play defense. You've got to think of your money as like a football team, right? You've got defenders and you've got midfield and you've got attackers. Use your money accordingly. So this is your defense. There is no point in building something brilliant if one accident just knocks it all down. So part of that 20% goes to build a moat around everything else. That means things like your emergency cash fund in a separate account, maybe 3 to 6 months worth of expenditure or spending. Don't leave that in your main bank account. And it means that you can cover income protection insurance or life insurance for those more significant parts of your life. By doing this, your bank account stops being a place where money sleeps, goes to die. It becomes the engine that powers everything else. Now, if you've made it this far, honestly, you are ahead of 99% of people. You're investing that 20%, brilliant. But are you taking enough risk? Now, most people, in my experience, aren't. They think they're being sensible, but they're actually leaving behind 50 to 100 grand on the table over their lifetimes. Now, that is exactly why you should watch this video here next, because I will break down the exact method that I use with my clients to fix this. It's called the headroom method. So watch this video here and I'll walk you through it today.